would love to explore with the two of you the why and how of nature connection practices. How do they impact us as individuals, and perhaps we can keep in the back of our mind that we want to also see. We don't have to do it right away. We can kind of meander in this direction, but how they also impact whole communities, collectives, and groups.
The why is really practical in my permaculture work because it's sort of the premise of the how it works is that with a greater connection to the natural world, that we can learn from it and apply it to our attitudes and actions and behaviors and the things that we work on. And it's not something that you can force or just say, okay, we ought to be more connected. I mean, it's an unfolding process. Yeah, so a big part of my work is getting out there and connecting and learning. And you don't know what you don't know until you begin. And we just begin somewhere and get involved. And it creates a kind of a field effect of understanding um, about living systems and how we can work with them as them in service of them. It's not something you can do from an armchair.
Yeah.
You can actually do it a little bit from an armchair, but you can't do very much of it from an armchair because we are living beings.
Yeah.
We can read about the forests and biology and living processes and learn from it. But ultimately we need to be grounded and in the real things.
These busloads of kids would come in and they would see, like, kids who had never seen a goat or, chickens. And they made that connection. Like, it's actually not just in a book or on TV and the excitement and wildness you would hear, the squealing and the laughing. I think of nature connection is as really a reconnection with our ecological self unfolding, and how that gets stymied so quickly in our development, as kids, when all of a sudden it's all about learning to read and connecting with a cognitive intellectual process rather than experiential. When you
Yeah.
think of how brief recess is and anything that is really embodied. So the fact that that is kind of turning a corner now, not enough still, but it's so important.
But I wonder if we can look at that a little more clearly, like why is it good to practice or to rediscover our ecological selves?
Because all relationships inform us of who we are.
Hmm.
Every relationship and the how it functions tells us something about
Yeah.
ourselves and um, the dynamics of interaction.
Yeah. Right. One thing that I found so fascinating in Richard Louv's book, I have it here somewhere, but he's the one who like coined the term nature deficit disorder. And his focus initially was on kids, and then as he spoke more and more on it, he found that he was coming into contact with all sorts of adults that were saying, "I have this too." But I read in one of his books that children who had been like traumatized, abused, felt abandonment, as they cultivated or had the opportunity to cultivate a deeper relationship with nature, they, got to visit a sit spot regularly, visit a particular forest regularly. They felt that sense of connection that they were lacking with their nuclear family or whatever their family context was.
Mhm.
So we can get the kinds of connections that we need as humans from the um, wider living system, like nature. We can connect to all of it in really profound ways, and I think it's surprising to a lot of people that live in this more mechanistic, highly fragmented, segmented world. That can come as a surprise that we can connect so deeply, and it can be so healing.
Without secure attachment, we experience anxiety or isolation, right?
Mhm.
So our being attached, when we talk about it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes outside the village of humans. It's also our relationships with the rest of the species on the planet. I'm really bad with wars too, so it's either World War I or II, men in the trenches, and how they would sneak off to villages to steal plants that they could bring back to the trenches. It gave them something to care for, and it brought beauty to this otherwise just horrific existence. And that we need that. We know from prison isolation, we know this. You give a prisoner a puppy to care for or a plant to care for, and it reconnects you to your own soul.
We're hitting perfectly on why to focus on the subjective human experience of nature connection and what it brings about in us. If we look at it more objectively, more intellectually, and look at all the things that we need to do, how do we do that unless we have the will? Connection actually does bring about the will. I mean, it gives a sense of the magic of what is gained through investing in connecting with nature. Yeah, it lights us up. I mean, I'm thinking about the first times I stepped foot on a like permaculture demonstration sites that were pretty established, and the sense of possibility that I saw, it shifted my whole worldview and fired me up. I mean, I was so excited. I mean, the amount of will that increased in me to be a part of whatever this was was life-changing.
Mm.
Yeah, I think there's a organismic, what I call a will to coherence, like an organismic will toward health and order. I don't mean order in the everything in a row sense, but order in the healthy way. Um, and in humans, um, because we are different, just as other organisms are unique and different too. Um, this will for meaning and purpose and coherence is a certain way.
Well, what Adrian was just talking about in the words he was using, of course, was describing what I know as Jungian psychology. Right? Jung talked about the self as the organizing principle, that archetype that arises during chaos to give something coherence. And I think that that's where the healing comes from. When we're feeling disturbed and disrupted, that energy comes that, it arises, or in Jungians would say it constellates. And it is the antidote in a way to that experience of chaos. And of course, it's all in flux. It doesn't last, but those are those moments of, it makes sense to me. I get it. I'm in the flow. I'm part of this system now. And I think that's where that joy comes from, or that awe. Jung called it numinosity. It lights you up. It's a very powerful experience. And it has that momentary sense of forward movement into something bigger than where your ego is stuck in the moment. It opens up a new pathway. And I think that's that potential for healing.